Hey there and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, I wanted to deal with the things that most drafting courses are about. And these are these little tricks and traps of drafting that you could really get caught on. And I've avoided it on purpose in this course because I want you to be thinking more strategically about your drafting rather than just about tricks and traps. Okay, so this lesson will give you the basic overlay of how to draft something, in particular a letter, because that's what you're going to be writing most often. So the first thing, use headings. Now your firm probably has a style guide. If it doesn't, pick something that looks appropriate, but you want to use headings. The reason you want to use headings is not just because I tell you to use headings, it in fact aids reading significantly. So if you go to the internet and you look at the list posts, you've probably seen these, the BuzzFeed things, 15 ways to do whatever, or 17 reasons that you're stupid, or something like that. The reason list posts are so popular is because people can fly through them very quickly and get a feel for what it is they're about to read before they've started reading it. That way, they can actually have a good idea, do I want to go back and read the whole thing, do I not? Now, if you're writing an advice, then they will hopefully go back and read the whole thing, but it will also allow them to pinpoint the areas that they want to actually read first. What you will find is that people will read those parts first, and then they will go back to the beginning and then read the whole thing through. And headings allow them to get to the places where they know they actually want to be. No headings just means you've got this big wall of text, and it's very, very hard to find where the thing you're really looking for is. Now, if you've crafted your letter well and using the principles that I've taught in this course, then that should be less of an issue because you remember the purpose and the audience, and so you've addressed those things in the way that you've delivered the letter in the first place. However, if you haven't done that, then headings will at least help you out. The next thing I wanted to encourage you to do is use more paragraphs than what you might otherwise be inclined to use. So under any given heading, and this is particularly for longer letters, obviously, but under any given heading, you can have a number of paragraphs, and they should be smaller rather than longer. If in doubt, hit a hard return and see what it looks like. You should really have each paragraph dealing only with one concept or one thought or one proposition before you move on to the next. A lot of people have a tendency to just write and write and write and write and write and write and write, and then not worry too much about paragraphs at the end. The paragraphs, again, they help the other person read the thing that you are writing. So you should ideally have smaller paragraphs rather than longer paragraphs. And with that flows in the concept of numbering and bullets and so on. Now, if you've been to law school, you've probably learned about numbers and bullets and things like that. So what you know is that if you're expressing a thought that has a number of different variations to it, then you can express that usually through numbers or bullet points. For example, rather than saying, the first question that we have is this, the second question we have is this, the third question we have is this, you could simply say, the questions we have are, numbered list, 1, next number 2, next number 3. And again, this is to aid reading comprehension, but it's also to break up the wall of text a little bit. You could say the exact same thing in prose, just in paragraphs, but you shouldn't. And you shouldn't because your audience will digest the information better if they can see it set out in that simple way. Now, I've encouraged shorter paragraphs. I'm also going to encourage shorter sentences. I had a boss once who was going to ban me from using the word and. The reason for that is that I had a tendency to spread my sentences out into multi-concept, difficult to read, and hard to understand monstrosities. And he was right, and I was wrong. If you find yourself using the word and a lot, consider whether it can be simply replaced with a full stop. Bring your thought to an end, start a new thought in a new sentence. The reason is this. Shorter sentences with single topics are much easier to understand, they're much easier to pull information from, you don't need to skip back and forth, and you won't lose your own train of thought. It also reduces the tendency for errors to creep in. When you write these really long sentences or really complex thoughts and you have ifs and buts and maybes and wherefores and why there arts and whatever, don't use any of those words. If you have all those things, then what you're going to find is that there will be errors creeping into your work because you will actually confuse yourself as you're writing them. So it's far better, if you can, to simply isolate a thought within a single sentence, then commence a new sentence. If you have a look through your letter, when you're proofreading it, if you have a look through your letter, then what you're going to see is that you will automatically use the word and, especially if you do dictation. You will find that because you speak differently to the way you write, at least at first until you get used to practicing, then you're going to produce things that sound a little bit more chatty, and that will involve more use of the word and. So if I were to write down a transcript of everything that I've said in this course, there would be a lot of ands in there, but it doesn't work as well when you're translating things into the written word. So I encourage you to avoid the use of the word and, avoid these things with commas everywhere, because it just means you are expanding out your sentences. Again, our aim is for brevity. All of these things are really helping you accentuate your brevity in your drafting style. And look, really that's all I wanted to go through in terms of the tricks and traps. This doesn't need to be overly complicated. It just needs to be from that purposive approach that I've been teaching in this course. If you look at those fundamental aspects of legal drafting and you look at your letter and you go, have I achieved those fundamental aspects or not? Then that will generally steer you towards the use of these tools and mechanisms that you have available to you. Things like numbered lists, numbered paragraphs, headings, shorter sentences, shorter concepts in any given spot. They just make for ease of reading. They allow you to be brief and they help hone your thoughts and give clarity and structure to your drafting. So that's the end of this lesson. Like I said, it doesn't have to be too complicated. Just use these strategies, but approach it from the purpose questions that I've already outlined in this course.